So, Jesse, I'm finally happy to have you on the podcast. Everybody out there, this is Jesse from Jesse James Comics. Welcome aboard, my friend.
I appreciate it. I've been watching for a while. I love the content of your show. I love your passion. So it's good to get in on a show where I have passion, you have passion, all about this great thing, comic books.
That's great to hear, man. So, I know you have a great story. So, let's start at the beginning. When did your first experience with comics start?
It's kind of funny. It started January 25th, 1982, and I was a skater punk. And actually, I was a skater punk and I was just getting into sports. So you can kind of throw in jock there. But I grew up in Las Vegas and we would ride our skateboards. And one day I just was beat. I couldn't take it. It was about 100, 110, 12-year-old. And I stopped in front of this store to take a break. And this gentleman came out and said, "Can you move away from my door? People can't come in." And as a 12-year-old, I was like, "Yeah, dude, whatever." And I took one step over. So the gentleman walked out and he actually handed me this book, this exact book, Avengers 129. And he said, "If I give you this book, will you just leave the store?" And I took this book and I went home and I must have read it 1,000 times, upside down, sideways. And I was just hooked. I mean, like, literally hooked, to a point that my parents would give me $1 for a lunch. I would ride my Pro Huffy sports bike to school. I would stop at 7-Eleven, buy 4 packs of Bubblicious for 25 cents each, and then pimp them out at lunch for 50 cents each. So I had $1 for lunch and $1 to spend in the dime bins at the friendly neighborhood comic book store. And I would go 5 days a week. And just hardcore young kid, just trying to get as much as he could and learn as much as he could. And what happened was, doing this every day for about 3 weeks straight, a gentleman walked in. The owner was in back, and the gentleman walked in, walked right to the back, grabbed a Batman #2 and walked out. As a 12-year-old, I'm going through the bin, and the wife comes in and says, "Oh, we sold the Batman #2." And the gentleman, Tom, is like, "No, we didn't." I go, "Oh," me not knowing, says, "Oh, your buddy came in and I think he's borrowing it." Right? So they have this argument and they decide they're going to call my dad. So they're like, "We need to talk to your dad." So I go home and I tell my dad. I think they thought I stole that. So they're going to be calling you on this. And so they called him, and about 10 minutes later, my dad walked in and said, "You're working at the friendly neighborhood comic book stores for bag, boards, and comics." And that was how I started. So not only was I already had a big collection of about maybe 40 books, 50 books, right? Now I'm working in this comic book store as a 12-year-old.
That's incredible. I had a similar experience growing up as a kid, even though I didn't actually get to work in the store. I was talking to somebody last week. It was Manu from the 99 newsstand, and we did a podcast together, and he actually had the same experience. We actually ended up working in a comic store as a kid, and I thought that was wild because that would have always been like my dream as a kid, to actually be by the books and get to go through the books all day. I know it's not actually like that when you actually have to work, but definitely one of my dreams. So what about the medium attracted you to it?
I think it's the therapy about it. The notion that throughout the decades I've done it, 43 years, comic books were my escapism. It was my, if I was having a tough day being on the football team, I could go home and still read my comics and be fine. As I started getting to the work world, having a good day or a bad day, I still have my comics, knowing that I could spend money for something that was mine, knowing that I could read something and actually have my own story on how I read it, right? And then creating that story on how you got that book and added it to your collection. I really like the numeric part about completing a set. That was very, very big for me. At the time that I started, we didn't even have miniseries out until Contest of the Champions. So I was right before miniseries had started. So we're still trying to collect action comics, right? Thinking as a 12-year-old, oh, I get all the action comics, no problem. But I think it was that adventure of this is mine. I'm working hard and this is mine. And being able to check off that checklist of saying, oh my gosh, I did complete that set. Working in a comic book store, seeing the joy that other people had to gain that book even made it even cooler for me to even be a larger expanding consumer. As I saw someone excited about Conan, oh, I better read that and find out if I like it.
So what age were you like when this happened?
So I started at age 12, and at age 13, I was already managing the store. At age 14, I was selling at my very first convention at the Riviera on the Strip by myself as a 14-year-old, slinging books. I actually sold the most books in the convention. And of course, I didn't know what I was pricing stuff at or anything, but it didn't matter. I was making money in a world that I loved. I was working in it, managing it, doing pull boxes, which were crazy back in the day because you didn't know what was in the box until you opened it up. I remember opening up a box because new issues came out on Friday, and you'd open up a box. I'm like, okay, who wants Wolverine #1? And someone raised their hand and like, what's a mini series? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm 13 years old. Do you want it or not? And so being at a young age, but now I will tell you, most people that I talk to started between the age of 12 and 16. That's just like the prime age for a comic book fan to start at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think for myself. I was definitely younger, but I think I'm younger than you anyway. But I was a lot younger. I was probably like 6 or 7 years old when I got into comics. So I think I had more of like a childlike experience where I wasn't thrust into working and having that great experience that you had. But I got to ask you, doing all this at a young age, 12, 13, and taking on the role that you did, being a manager, growing up in the comic book store business, what made you want to do it as like a career going forward?
You know what? So I've always sold comics. There was never a week where I wasn't selling comics. Even when I was in corporate with Nordstrom, even when I was a regional for Florsheim, I was always selling comics on the weekend. Now, this is pre-internet, obviously. So I was at swap meets selling. I was at a comic book store trading on trading nights. But the one thing that I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to be an Overstreet advisor. Even back in the day, I said I was reading that Overstreet, and I was like, you know what? I want to write this book. That was one of my first goals. My second goal was I want to have a cover that has my name on it with Vampirella and Red Sonja. And my owners thought I was crazy as this 12, 13, 14-year-old kid who I don't even think we had the word entrepreneur back in those days. And as I started going through corporate and it started to be in forums, right, and understood I could build a brand with my name. And I'm talking with my peers and people that might be new, and I can help coach them and all that. It really tailored into when I went into a store, I would always walk out saying, well, here's what they did good, but here's what I could do to even make it better. And I just remember giving my notice at Nordstrom to the president of the company, and he said to me, you're going to go open up a comic book store, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And that's when I realized my passion about comics. Even though I wasn't expressing it at work, people knew I was a comic book fan. And it was cool, and it was awesome.
It is awesome. I got to tell you, that's where I think me and you have a little bit of a likeness involved. I am like the same way where I could see something and I always try to look for a way to make it better. Like, what could we do to improve upon this? Like, that's just my personality. Even with my current job, what I do for my life and my work, which I actually hate, by the way, but we'll talk about that at a different time. But like, that is how I am. So I totally understand where you're coming from with this.
Yeah. And I think that's what drives you. Most people that are successful aren't driven by the amount of money they're making. They're driven by the customer base they're building, the brand they're building social media, Those are big accomplishments that not a lot of people can do. Not a lot of people can get in front of a microphone. They could be the greatest talker in a store. You put them in front of a microphone, they suck, right? They freeze on you.
You mentioned something before about Overstreet, and I did want to mention to you, or ask you, I should say, about Overstreet, because I don't know if a lot of comic collectors, I should say newer comic collectors, know how big Overstreet was when we were younger. It still has definitely has a role today, but what made you want to be an advisor? How did that go about? And tell me what the work that goes on at Overstreet that you did.
Overstreet is a guide to get you started. And the reason why I wanted to be an Overstreet advisor was, even though it came out once a year pre-internet, that was our only guide. Other than calling someone, we had no idea how to price something. When Thor 337 came out, not having anything, not having a price guide that was up to date, we had to guess on the first beta array. You know, we kind of said, okay, well, that one sold for 20. Let's sell the next one for 25. Let's sell the next one for 30, until we knew there was that point where people say, oh, no, I'm not paying that much. I think being an Overstreet advisor, regardless of where it lands today, as a little bit obsolete, a little bit late on pricing, but again, it's still a guide to get you there. And gives you a starting point. I think it serves as a purpose for a generation that is still in the comic book world. Average comic book fan is 40 to 65, right? Well, most of those consumers have used the Overstreet to start off their career, or their collecting career, or their selling career. Becoming an Overstreet advisor is a challenge. I became an Overstreet advisor mainly because I'd been turned down so many times, and I just had to find that way to get back into it. And the way to get back into it was to be aggressive, was to provide information that maybe Overstreet wasn't providing. So everybody was giving you numbers on AF-15, where I would say, no, we need to focus on Batman Adventure 12s, Deadpool 98, ASM 300s, where the modern market is buying. So it is hard work, because you are taking 12 months and you're saying, okay, when I found my report on these specific books, this is where I see where it lies. Also, at the end of the day, you're following your state of the industry report. I have been right 2 years ahead every time you read my article, whether it be Diamond not being in business, Marvel leaving Diamond, DC leaving Diamond, the birth of Kickstarters, the birth of social networking. I've always understood this business, and the best way to get ahead of it is get your voice out there. Whether you're writing for Bleeding Cool, over 100 articles written for them, or being an Overstreet advisor, or being one of the first people on Facebook for comic book stores. I think we have a moment that we can bring our brand and bring other consumers with us at the same time.
So obviously, going from being an Overstreet advisor, how long have you owned your own store?
So technically, I've owned a physical store since 2009, actually August 28th, 2009, which is Kirby's birthday. We actually waited a month till we opened up that store to make sure we opened it up on his birthday.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's just been rock and roll. We started off in Arizona. We started off in a small store, moved to a bigger store, then we moved to a bigger store, and then we actually moved to a humongous store as our growth happened. We got into Pokemon and Magic, and put in an 80-piece arcade and comic books and video games. And as you expand your brand and as you pivot, you obviously need more space.
Yeah.
About 9 months ago, we decided that we wanted to move back to Florida, to Shannon's house. And so we kind of did that, and kind of hanging around doing YouTube and talk shows and live streaming. It didn't feel the same not having a store. So we reopened in DeLand, Florida, in a nice, very spacious 3,600 square foot store. And this store is a great boutique. It carries everything you can think of in the comic book world, whether it be records, Disney, vintage shirts, socks, cups, plates, pretty much anything collectible, comic books, action figures, statues. We buy everything. And the store is the extension because we do estate sales on the weekend. We go out and we find stuff at discount stores during the week. So we have a store, and then we have this business that is outside the store that even makes it more exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't imagine having all that stuff. And like, so when you say you expanded, what was your biggest size, like square footage that
Our
you were?
biggest store was 9,000 square feet.
Oh,
That's
wow.
where we were at the max. I think in the end we could have been a little bit more smarter, right? If you look at 80 pinball machines and you say, well, really only 25 are being played. So
Yeah.
what can we put in those sections? And I think that's where we kind of failed because we look cool, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's about, what are you ringing in your register? Does
Yeah.
that Elvira pinball machine, we paid XYZ, it hasn't taken in 1 quarter, let's move that, put a statue there or more comics or whatever it is.
Did you own all these pinball machines or you rented them? I'm assuming you owned them, right?
So I had a great partner who owned them all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this guy was amazing. Every pinball machine you could think of, if it came out from Stern, it was in the store the same day or the next day. Stand ups all over the place, sit downs, air hockey machines. The one thing when it gets to arcades, it's the cost of fixing them that is, in the end, is your demise every month because you're so, oh my gosh, we did XYZ and here comes the guy at the bill. Well, maybe we broke even. Right?
Yeah. I'm an 80s kid, so I do arcade stuff here on the channel as well. And to me, like that holds this very special place in my heart. I couldn't imagine going to a store that had arcades and comics and all this pop culture stuff. Man, that'd be like a dream for me. I never had that all under one roof, so that's amazing to me. That's awesome.
And the worst thing is when someone beats your score, your high score, you'll stay in your store till like 6 a.m. till you beat it. And then you'll put it on your Facebook page and like, no one cares about your high score.
That's in the era that we grew up in. Like you probably grew up a little bit before me, but like still like the same type of era where like that stuff mattered. So that's awesome. So now that you're in Florida, you're in the boutique store. You mentioned a few of the things that you do sell. I know we've talked about socks before that you say are great sellers, because being in retail myself, like they're inexpensive, I imagine, right? If you can get something that calls back to nostalgia that is inexpensive, I think they're always going to sell. So what other stuff, that are niche, that you would say you sell that like really sell well, you think?
What's funny is socks sell well because it's easy to sell them. It's just because people need socks, first of all. And if they're a Turtles fan, I can walk over and say, oh my gosh, you don't want to have cold feet tonight, guess what I got for you? I got these turtle socks to go with your turtle comics, right? The one big thing that surprises me every single week is how many VHS tapes we sell. It is actually mind-boggling to think how many VHS tapes sell to people that don't have VHS players. VHS players are extremely hard to get, and they sell for great dollars. They are very good selling machines. When we get them in, obviously we test them first. People love VHS machines. They love record players. It's crazy to think that we sell to a demographic 16 to 25 that buy records because they like the cover, but don't have record players, right? Our job is to sell stuff. Our job is to educate to a point to where the person says, I really don't care about the music. I just love this cover, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm a Neil Diamond. My father was a Neil Diamond fan, so I'm buying this so I can remember my father. But you think that plushies are off the freaking hook. Even when you go to genres and you say, okay, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that's a given. But then you start going down that path of Dragon Ball Z figures or Power Ranger figures, and you open up that door to Godzilla figures. There's a notion that you should sell what you're good at selling and not try to sell stuff you know nothing about. in the collectible world, I don't think you need to know too much about the collectible world. You have to have great prices, you have to have great product, you have to have great social networking, and people that want to buy from you. It's very, very simple. I think we try too hard to sell stuff, and we try to make ourselves bigger than the product itself or the brand. And I don't think you have to do that in this day and age. But in general, I will tell you, anything that is collectible, we want to buy and we want to sell. I know that sounds generic, but that's the way a boutique works. My job is to sell you something you did not come in looking for. That's my ultimate job. If you come in looking for Amazing Spider-Man and you walk out with Amazing Spider-Man, I've done nothing.
So VHSs right now are really hot. I'm not a huge VHS collector, but I've noticed people going out and buying them. I was at a show recently by me where a guy had a ton of them, and people were buying because they were inexpensive nostalgia boosters. That's what they are. 80s VHS. You remember going out to the video store, renting them, watching them. I think a lot of people like the artwork, of course, on the, I don't even know what they're called, if they're called dust jackets or what they are. The sleeve. Yeah, the sleeve. I think a lot of the people love, seeing that and remembering back to when they watched that movie for the first time. I just think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it is. And it's the notion that, keep in mind, when these movies came out in the blockbuster days, you technically couldn't buy those movies until a certain period of time, and then they would sell you the VHS. But you had to wait. So it's like rent, be kind, rewind, right? And so, yeah, I think it's cool because what we are seeing is the age demographics mix when it comes to VHS tapes, when it comes to records. There's a good ambiance of, it's okay if I didn't live in that era. I want to buy that. I want to put that on my wall. To think that we have sold 5 Bell rotary telephones in the last 10 weeks to people under 20 years old.
All right, so back to comics. In your shop, do you still, obviously I'm assuming you have new books and you have, vintage as well, you have back issues. Is that the case?
Yeah, so we are a very unique store when you come in. Our new issues is about 4 feet on 2 tables. We're not going to have slat wall with the comics going across so you can see everything and then see what didn't sell. We turn and burn when it comes to new issues. Basically, pull boxes +1 is kind of our goal. Unless it's a number 1 or a blind bag or something like that, we'll buy more. Then we sell back issues, and back issues are very unique because we do our store based on trends and we do it based on genre. We don't do it based on publisher. So all our horror is in one space. All our space books are in one space. All the bad girls, strong women, bondage, all is in one place. So that individual isn't buying, they're cross-buying. They're no longer buying by publisher, they're buying by title, which is very, very important. And so I think at the end of the day, we will continue to find new ways to sell back issues. And keep in mind, throughout my history, back issues have always been the best-selling product in my stores that I've either sold in or own in a store.
I agree with you. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who just strictly collect back issues, but I'm also hearing of some more, shops around the area no longer carrying new books. And I don't know if that's a thing now, but I have been seeing it. So do you know of anybody doing that? Because there are rumblings that I've heard from people saying they're no longer doing it.
So if you look out through history, this decade, I was the very first comic book store to drop Diamond and stay in business. Traditionally, if a store drops new issues, they're going out of business. Our bill every week at Diamond was $10,000 to $15,000 a week. I had 550 box holders. One day I just woke up and said, listen, I'm spending $15,000 to make $2,000, but I'm chasing 200 box holders every week. So we just stopped new issues for literally 5 years. We just got back into it just because we knew we still had to get that new issue customer, and telling a customer no is just horrible, especially when it is new issues. And it's like, I just want Batman. Stores that do it are being fiscal responsible, and that is fine. understanding that you're telling a customer, no, it took me 5 years to kind of say that probably wasn't the right way to do it. We can still carry new issues, but instead of spending $15,000 a week, why don't we spend $300? And why don't we just sell everything? And it's okay to be sold out. You don't have to have, now I'm going to back up here. Keep in mind, when I dropped new issues, no one was selling to me for the first 6 months because I had changed the way a comic book store was seen as, someone who carried new issues, then back issues. Well, I said, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to be one of the first 2 live streamers in the comic book history and collectible history. June 16th, 2016, it was me and Sean Hidako over at Comic League, the very first 2 people to live stream on Facebook. So I'm going to sell back issues, not only on live streaming, I'm going to sell back issues on my eBay store, and I'm going to sell back issues in my store, and I'll make more money than I ever will trying to sell new issues. So it's not odd that people are doing. I think some people just say, listen, I want to have fun doing this business. It's very hard to make it's very hard to make profit on a new issue purchase because you have to do the same thing the next week.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's this constant needing money for next week's issues. So I applaud those people. They don't have to go the path I had. If you go look at the articles on Bleeding Cool of what people said about me for dropping new issues, it was crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I think a comic book store that can provide great comic book therapy and comic books to their consumer, I think they're going to be fine.
So you mentioned an interesting point, how like you use various platforms to sell back issues. Talk about how important it is, especially nowadays, to have multiple platforms to be able to sell things. Because I think a lot of people forget about that. Like I personally, like there's a lot of Instagram sales, but like I'm not a shop. But even my local LCS, not only do they sell at their own shop, they sell at the local shows that they attend to. They go to bigger cons. They sell on eBay as well. They take every opportunity to sell their books. Talk about how important it is, or how important you think it is in our industry now today.
Right. I would say in any business that you're in, if you are relying for walk-in customers to come into your store to be your only source of income, you're not going to be in business very much longer. That's just not tangible. That's not, if you say business 101, okay, great, but you need to update business 101 to the world that we are in today. We have a great eBay page, 98,000 feedback, never had a negative, never had a case open against us. I think we've had 2 neutrals in our whole history. If you can provide great customer service, you should be on every platform possible, getting your brand out, getting your product out, getting service out. That's how you make it in the new world. Your name, your brand is very, very important. So by being on multiple platforms, whether it be eBay, I am Godfather eBay Live, right? I'm one of the first folks on eBay Live. We did Whatnot for 17 seconds, just wasn't our cup of tea. I'm literally saying 17 seconds because that's how long we were on there. But that's fine. I own Comic Book Shopping Network, which is the third big boy in the slinging world live streaming. And we have flagship stores across the nation that live stream. That's awesome. That's great. But at the end of the day, you need to be everywhere possible, whether it be selling on Facebook Live, Facebook Static, eBay Live, eBay proper, doing conventions, getting your cards out there, shaking hands. You should be on Facebook, right? I think we were one of the first stores ever to hit 50,000 followers on Facebook in like 2018. Reaching out to people around the world. And the reason why this is very important is live streaming was created by QVC and these other companies to reach orphan customers that did not have, in this case, a comic book store in their city. So I could be their comic book store. But what we started to find out was when we're shipping stuff, I would be like, wait, we're shipping stuff to Florida, Texas, and California. Don't they have stores? And realize that there's a lot of people that are hermits. There's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable walking into a comic book store. Maybe their comic book store is still kind of that old guy in the chair that just sits there and rings you up, and maybe they want interaction on today's news. So not to do it technically makes no sense to me. Mm-hmm. But my job is to sell for my brand first and take care of my customer base first. And if I have time, consult and try to help another store across the nation.
And I think trust is a huge thing, especially with buying now. You know, our industry has gotten so, I don't want to say littered because that's not the right word, but it's gotten so to a point, especially like on internet platforms where you really have to be able to trust the person you're buying books from, especially when we're talking about vintage, we're talking about, you know, restoration, incomplete, grading. It's become a huge thing ever since CGC came upon us in the early 2000s. So I just think that knowing who you're buying from, having, you know, I don't want to say solace into purchasing and feeling that comfort with another person, it really is, you know, comforting, right?
Yeah, I think what happens is if someone gets burnt someplace else, how many times do they get burnt until they say, you know what? I love Jesse's store, but I've been burnt too many times, so I'm just not going to buy on live streams anymore. I'm not going to buy on eBay pages unless my comic book store has it. I ain't doing it. Or I'm traveling and I see it at a convention. So how people treat their customers affects the whole comic book industry as a whole. We need confidence in a consumer buying a product. When it gets to grading, yes, that's subjectable and that does happen. But at the end of the day, your feedback, everything is your brand 24/7. We have a great benefit that we could actually be on eBay proper, selling an item and have people that are less than us, which is very rare, but we could be more than the person, but because we're at 100% and 98,000 plus feedback, they're going to buy from us instead of saving $2 from the guy that has 10 negatives. That's common sense. The problem is platforms don't hold the sellers' feet to the fire, and there are sellers that literally don't care about their brand, about their name. They technically just want to put that money in their bank account and nothing else.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about the comic book market. You've been in this industry for a really, really long time. What has changed about the market over that time frame?
What has changed is a couple of things. So average sale has increased tremendously. The women consumer buying comic books has risen quite a bit. And a crazy number that we look at is in Arizona, we're about 15% women customer base. In Florida, we're almost 60%. So we've had to pivot. Why? Because the lady consumer is accessorizing their buy, right? They got to have the comic book, the shirt, the cup, the sock, and a VHS tape, whatever it is, right? Purses, we have purses. And so those are two things. The biggest measure that has changed is we are more educated on value. So value, now we can pull up our phone, we can go to Key Collector, we can scan that comic book in front of us, either Google, eBay, you have Go Collect, you have all these companies that can help you decide on making that right decision at the right price that fits your pocketbook, but that might actually give you some value at the same time. The second biggest thing is social networking. Social networking has become huge. How we communicate with people, how we create hype on something that should not have hype. On the flip end, there is stuff that should have hype that doesn't get any play. like socks, right? So yeah, and I'll keep on bringing up socks because I get emails every day. I was at a store and they had socks, whatever it is. So at the end of the day, you look at social networking, you look at the actual value of a comic book, you look at the rise in the women collector, and you look at the average sale increase. All of this has become very important to us because comics now sell 24/7. Even when eBay first came out, people are kind of like, oh, it's midnight, gotta get off eBay, not realizing, no, it's 24/7. We live in a very competitive world with platforms that are constant, non-stop selling, right? My live stream on eBay, which I haven't done in 90 days because building the store, but we start off next week. I live stream from 12:30 a.m. to 3 a.m. and I still have tons of people that are selling live at the same time as me. So
wow.
I think the ability to get books, this is a great thing. You could never go to San Diego Con your whole life, and now you can get every single exclusive at San Diego Con and never go.
Yeah.
That is
Makes
amazing.
sense.
So I think at the end of the day, what we've seen is a market that is, number one, it's acceptable, right? If you're in corporate world and you leave a corporate meeting and you guys are eating sandwiches and drinking orange juice or whatever, you could literally say, hey, any of you collect comic books? And people are going to raise their hand. Or I love comic books. I love going to the movies. Has movies helped? Yes. Financially, for the comic book store, no. It's a very small percentage. We get about a 2-week bump on a movie, right? And then it's next movie up, but there's not really a big bump. And I think that's because of partnerships with us in the movie industry. They don't work with us. We don't work with them technically. So I think the other thing that we want to look at is traditionally in the comic book world, especially the 60s, 70s, 80s, and mid 90s, most retailers were over 30 years old. Now we have retailers that are 18, 21, 18 through 30, basically in this industry, having comic book stores as well. There's this notion that, do I agree with some compadres' idea that there's only 1,200 comic book stores in the world? Maybe. I think that number is 1,500. But regardless, when I started, there was 13,000. Right now on eBay, there are over 77,000 people that sell comic books on eBay. So a comic book store is the minority in the person slinging books right now. So I think that's where the market changed. I don't think grading has in any way changed the market. It has impacted it for the type of consumer that buys CGC, but it's such a small part of the actual comic book industry.
I that's the question I wanted answered. You just kind of answered it right there, because I think a lot of people who do collect today, especially the people that I follow on Instagram, everything is, I want to say, all encompassing when it comes to grading, and they don't get the fact that comics are more than just, coming from when we were younger to where they are now. It's not just about the grade. And I think everything has just basically been about that ever since maybe about 2005, right? I understand that CGC and the grading companies are there to protect us and, prevent some of the stuff that was happening prior. But at the same time, I feel like two people they caught up in the grade, and that's the only thing they're worried about, as opposed to some of the great comics we grew up at. I know me and you spoke earlier about culture and tradition and about what these books mean and what our industry means to the few people that are still left from, years ago who collected a certain way. Do you want to touch on that and what we spoke a little bit about the culture and the tradition?
And the question to you and your audience once they watch this is, how many stores have you walked in that only sold graded books?
Mm.
Right? That's a simple answer.
Yeah.
None. So we have 200 graded books in the store. right? And we have some great graded books, but by the time I sell 1,000 items, I get someone ask about a grade or a graded book. So I got to do both, right? And it's okay to do both. I think what happens in that world, everybody is trying to be better than the next person. I got 8.5, great. I got a 9.0. Oh, well, I got a 9.2, right? My pages are wider. Well, look at my staples, whatever it is. Even in a graded book, they're still being competitive. They don't look at the grade now. They're trying to figure out how their 10 point or their 9.6 is better than the other person's 9.6. So there is this notion that that consumer doesn't read comics. That consumer isn't technically in the store at least once a week. I challenge any show that talks about graded books, go to your local comic book store, ask them if they can work in that store for 1 week, 5 days, and listen to consumers who buy comics. And most consumers that are buying comics are so excited to read the story. They're excited about that cover they just bought. They're excited about completing their collection. They're just excited about the comic book therapy that is offered. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people that collect graded books. That's awesome because it does sell and it does provide awesome assurances when you're buying online that it is a 9.8, or when you're doing an auction and someone shows a 9.8. That's great. But again, my challenge will always be walk into a convention, find a table that's all CGC. Right? And that's, oh, we only sell CGC. You're losing 85, almost 90% of the customer base that buys raw. So we want to protect our tradition. We want to protect our culture. And I think that is very, very important. We are gatekeepers. We are people that are a prime example. Yesterday, a young lady came in. What'd she walk out with? Crisis on Infinite Earth, Watchmen, and Flash Rebirth.
And socks.
Right? Yeah, and some socks, right? And we want to make sure that we're educating people on the thing you're reading today all started from Crisis on Infinite Earth. You like Black Suit Spider-Man? Here you go. Marvel Secret Wars. First miniseries, Contest of Champions, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can play that in the graded world, because now you're talking about a grade and you're talking about something you can't read. Yeah, you can go online and read or get a reader copy. So you do lose that portion of the tradition and culture of collecting comics. I just bought a collection and the guy just graded his whole Phantom Stranger run. All right, so I got 36 copies of 1 through 36. I'll never sell them, right? But to him, that was the talking point of his collection. It wasn't that he had, 2 first appearances of Boba Fett and a first appearance of Black Suit Spider-Man Secret Wars 8. It was, I graded this thing. And that's great because that's his culture and tradition. Don't forget, we're protecting the comic book lore of tradition and culture, but then you also have your own culture. And our job is not to tell you you're wrong about your culture. I do want to mention one thing. We have spent decades telling people what to buy. We're now in a world where people tell you what they want. And I think that's the more important part of this conversation, especially when it gets to grading. If you want it graded, we're going to send it out. I just had Mark Spears at the store. We had CGC witnesses here and sent out, and that was awesome. Half the people that came to the event, their stuff went to grading. So awesome. Great. We want to make sure we're selling to everybody and never telling someone they're wrong for what they do.
100%. And the big thing about grading, and I know this from experience, because when I got back into collecting, I had joy from this, but I think there is joy in sending your books off to a grading company, waiting for the grades, having that anticipation, then when finally getting them back, having that joy or disappointment in seeing those grades. That is a thing. That is something that I think a lot of collectors look forward to. So that is also like a thing that I think brings people who have gotten into the hobby and they enjoy that as well, and hopefully keeps them there. It's just, everything that happened in 2020 to 2022 with prices falling and books going crazy, stuff like that. I feel bad for those people for kind of getting in at the wrong time, because I think it drove a lot of good people out of the hobby. But I don't think it was the grading companies, like you said. I think they are a valuable part of our community. And if people want to send grading in books in for grading, they shouldn't be, I don't want to say targeted for it, but everybody has had that feeling of sending books in and getting them back and knowing, what you have, because that is very exciting. So definitely part of the market.
Exactly. And socially, for a comic book store, the mail calls that they do and all the stuff that they do represent still that social awareness of, listen, I'm doing XYZ and I want you to be involved. Having consumers involved, having customers involved, live streaming. If you're a good live streamer, you don't control your chat. You let those people become friends so they can talk about wrestling and all this stuff that they're talking around in chat. And you're just reminding them, hey, I got this comic here too. Right. Yeah. And so you're building this community around everything. And I think that's very, very important. The one thing with grading that traditionally happens, there's a value attached to grading, where most comic book collectors, the value is, hey, I completed my set, or I needed this. And I think that's the difference. Most collections I buy, throughout my 43 years of buying collections, I would say 99.9% of every purchase I've done, when you ask them, what do you need? Not what do you want, but what do you need? They have no idea what their collection is worth. Why? Because they never worried about something like that. Mm-hmm. What do you mean your collection's not in order? I don't know. I just bought comics.
So that brings me to my next point, the future of comics. There are people out there think that the blind bag is the future, gambling with comics. I forgot the new website, what it's called, something IO, I think. I forgot, where you can go ahead and purchase online comics and decide if you want to keep it or you want to sell it back to them. It's almost like a blind bag online type of thing.
Right.
What do you think about that? And what do you think the future of comics are?
I may talk about the future first. The future, there is no better time to be selling or buying comics in our history. Because of all the platforms you can get product, the way you can social with other consumers across the nation, maybe never meet them, but become great friends and talk about great stories and great times. I think what is happening when it comes to distribution, listen, our job is to sell books. I could care less, even though I talk about it every week on the Tuesday show, I could care less what's going on over there at XYZ. Can the consumer come in and buy a product that will make them happy? That is the most important thing. And if we can guide them in a direction when we don't have something, by the way, I'm still going to get that to you, but let me show you this. So I think our future is great. Our future is great as long as you're looking straight and forward. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in our industry that talk about doom and gloom more than doing the number one thing that solves everything. Sell something. That's all you have to do is sell something. No one cares where that book comes from. They don't care if it came from Diamond. They don't care if it came from Lunar, and they don't care if it came from Penguin. They just want their books. So that's the future. And the future is very bright. When it gets to gimmick books, we've had gimmick books since the start of the comic book world. We've always had something gimmicky. We were just talking about Chromium and how Chromium comics wore the stuff. Exo Man of War #0 and Turok and all these Chromium covers and all that. Everything has a time frame. You got to keep in mind, technically, Superman, Death of Superman, we sold hundreds of thousands of blind bags, even though it's the same book in every single bag, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the notion. People knew what they were getting, and they were buying blind bags. So imagine when they don't know what they're getting, how much it is. Is it gambling with your money? it's gambling with your money if you're expecting an immediate return, right? That's gambling. If you're buying and in the future, something is worth something awesome when you're ready to sell your collection. Are blind bags good for the industry? The blind bags are good for the industry because it does give publishers and artists and colorists and inkers more work. So yes, definitely. Again, we are not in the business to tell people what to buy. We are to listen what people want, and we are to sell them. Right now, people do want mystery bags. And if mystery bags continue to grow and they continue to sell, we'll see everybody go through it. We just had Brian Polito on, and he said, yes, we're going to dab into it at some point. Then that's fine. It's when we do gimmicks that do not sell. If you're in the Pogs game, you needed to know when to get out of Pogs, right? When you're in the Beanie Baby game, you needed to know when to get out of Beanie Babies. As long as you're watching your market inside your store and listening to people, you will always know when blind bags is the time to get rid of. So I've got 1,000 Mark Spears blind bags coming in. All right, we're authorized to open up at midnight. And Mark is then live streamed through the computer and talk to the fans for 10 minutes. Other than that, I'm not buying 10,000 bags.
Yeah.
I'm buying 100, selling out, and buying the next thing. So if there's something attached to it, I get it. All these pages that do mystery bags or trade in this and trade into that, that's fine. I always say, let's talk to them after 3 years. If they're still here after 3 years, awesome, great. It's just like a new store. Don't tell me anything about that store until he hits the 3-year mark. Then we'll find out how much longer he's going to be in this market. So, do we need bells and whistles? Absolutely. Do people that buy mystery bags, knowing they can buy cover A on the counter, and they buy that cover A and they buy the mystery bag, awesome. If someone's buying just the mystery bag and does not want to read the comic, that's also great. But we also have to make sure we realize that when we reorder issue 2s, right? And so it's a tough question because there are stores that need nuggets. They need something that is going to provide them with that extra amount of dollars. Here's the scary part about when you look at turn rate, sell-through, bottom lines, which every business uses. Comic book industry doesn't, but every industry uses this number. When we look at 350,000 blind bags sold, regardless of these jamokes there, then go on and sell 4 days early and open up the bags live. Okay, let's forget about those idiots, whatever we want to call them. You still have to compete against 1,200 stores selling the same product the same day. Mm-hmm. There are 9 stores surrounding me. How many blind bags am I going to sell versus the other stores selling? So I do have major competition when it comes to ordering. You know, I've had Spears at the store. So again, it makes sense for me to do it. But most stores, if you're ordering 50 to 100 blind bags, you're going to be buying. It's like doing an exclusive, right? You take a gamble. I've done 423 exclusives now. I've sold out of 300. I've sold out of 390. And those 33 are the only ones that drive me nuts. I could care less about the ones I sold out. It's the ones I'm like, and why did I do this book? You know, I was the crazy guy that was doing Rick and Morty and Bob's Burger and Power Rangers all at the same time and just selling a whole bunch of books. But then Bitch Planet came out, you know, and you get in that hype. Oh, I got to do exclusives, and you do it and you don't sell anything. So we are the own, we actually create our own path by our own actions, but we like to blame everybody else for it. Well, the industry. Yeah. Well, what are you doing?
So here's a good question. I think maybe a lot of people would want to know this, but what is the toughest thing that you've had to deal with owning a shop or selling comics? Just to say, I'll broaden that so it's not just owning a shop, but selling
Right.
comics.
I think nowadays when I first started, I could go to work, I could have separation, and then go to the comic book store. And that comic book therapy walking in was awesome. And then when I walked out, bam, I'm right back into the real world. A comic book store owner now just can't go out to dinner. They can't go watch a football game. Why? Because a movie promo comes on. Right? You're out and about and your phone is zapping on Facebook. Why? Because you posted something 3 hours ago about comic book and now everybody's off work and now they're commenting. So the hardest thing is trying to be relevant, trying not to burn yourself out, trying to love this business without being involved in it so much that you actually don't like it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very, very important to realize that we do have to live a regular life. And I think when people come in my store and they see the 70 pictures or 80 pictures of, whether it be Jack Kirby or George Perez or Neil Adams or whoever, Todd McFarlane, Rob Light, whoever it is, or all the wrestlers on the wall, or all the stars that I met. I'm trying to tell you my culture, but I'm also trying to tell you I'm also a Buc-ee's fan. I'm also, I love Sizzlers, even though there's not one in Florida and it's driving me nuts. I'm a huge Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan. So when I moved up this way, everybody was more excited about me being able to see my Bucs than me opening up a new store. Why? Because we're trying to stay relevant, but we're also in the comic book world, but we're also trying to prove to people we're just people, right? We're just fans. We have other things that we like to do. So I think that's one of the things. I think the other thing is the hardest thing in this business is it's okay if I fail. I have failed 1,000 times. I will tell everybody that it's okay to fail. Admit it, but tell people what you did to make it better. It's the biggest. I think the second biggest challenge is seeing your buddies fail, and when they won't accept help because their ego doesn't allow that. That's kind of the second thing, because you want everybody to be successful. Are there people in the world that I can write cats are the greatest thing in the world, and they're going to say, see, that's why I don't like you, because I love dogs, right? You're just not going to make everybody happy, and that's fine. I have thick skin. You can say whatever you want, but there are retailers out there that don't, and the little things bug them. And when you try to coach them and you see them fail, I think that's such a huge part of this industry that hurts you a lot, because you don't celebrate someone's failure. You try to help them be successful, or you at least offer them an ear to listen to. I think if there was a third thing, is trying to keep up with tech that is relevant to your business, but also understanding you can't go with the majority on everything. And the thing is, if you're in an AI conversation, which throws everybody against AI, but if you have a web page or you're using StreamYard right now, you want to use these systems that help your platform look extremely better. So I think that's the third thing. Those are the three biggest things. I don't think failure is an issue in the comic book world, because we all do it, and we do it more than probably any other industry does, but our industry allows it. You know what? I wanted to talk about in 1982, I had this great opportunity. I was at work, and they said, tomorrow we need you here at right when you get out high school. At that time I was in junior high school. We need you to run over. It was across the street, and we need you here at 1:00. So I run across the street. Oh, they say there's going to be a signing, right? And so I go, okay. I think at that time I was 13. And they go, here's the deal. We need you to stand by this tape, and we need you to watch the line, know when it is to cut. Now, when I get across the street, there's already 100 people in line. And technically the signing's not for another hour. So I stand there. I'm 4'8", 80 pounds wet, right? I'm like, okay, I'm then watch this line. Like, I'm then tell that guy, hey, what are you doing? Get back in line, get out of line or whatever. Here comes this elderly gentleman, and he walks up and he goes, are you Jesse? And I go, yes. He goes, well, I'm Jack Kirby. Make sure no one cuts in line. And as a 12-year-old, I'll be honest with you, it took me about 20 years to realize that moment, how important that moment was. I fortunately worked in a store where the store owners took pictures of everything. And so I sent you a great picture, and it's me with Jack Kirby. But watching people in line shaking, Mr. Kirby, and Jack would open up the page, and he'd go to a panel, and he'd tell you a story about this panel. Me and Stanley disagreed on the background. I said it was going to be red. He wanted blue. Well, guess what? It's red. And then he would sign the book. And so as a 13-year-old getting into this business, running the line for Jack Kirby, going to have dinner with him, one of the things that you'll find out with me is I'm a huge Hawkeye fan, and I say that with quotes, is when you walk into my store, I have original art from Hawkeye all over the world. And I had just bought Avengers 172 that day, which has Hawkeye on the cover, which I'm looking at right now. Jack Kirby signed that book for me. At dinner, he says to me, who's your favorite character? And I said, Avengers. Well, my favorite character at the time was Captain America, but I just bought that Avengers 172 with Hawkeye on the cover. So he said, no, who's your single? And I said, Hawkeye. And as I'm saying Hawkeye, I'm like, Hawkeye's not who the heck likes Hawkeye? It's Captain America, but I said Hawkeye. And Jack Kirby said to me, oh my gosh, no one has said Hawkeye. And to this day and age, I will never switch from being Hawkeye. Because I promised Jack Kirby that was my favorite character. The great thing about this experience, not only did that year I go to the very first San Diego Comic-Con when it was at the El Cortez, and the great thing about this was someone in line took a picture of Jack Kirby hugging me while he was telling a joke. And that person found me on Facebook probably about 10 years ago and sent me that picture. So not only do I have my setup picture where I'm with Jack Kirby, I have this picture is kind of like the pre-picture, right? Kind of like when me and you were talking before the show. What happens in the comic book world throughout your history will impact you tremendously. The great thing about my picture of Jack Kirby on the wall is someone will say, oh my gosh, that's you with Jack Kirby. And we can communicate, and I know how to communicate with that person. We can have a great conversation about anything we want historically. But the other cool thing is the person that says to me, that young kid who says, is that your grandfather in the picture? I can now pivot and guess what? Become a historian to that kid and tell him, hey, do you like the movies? You won't believe who created those characters. So I think I have been very, very fortunate, not only being one of the first pioneers to lead Diamond and sell back issues, one of the first two people ever to live stream, understanding Facebook at an early age, understanding pricing is get prices as low as possible, get those customers a great price and a great storyline. But the notion was building a brand for not just the brand itself, for myself, with everybody surrounded with you on this journey and on this adventure. That's the awesome, awesome thing I get to do. On Tuesdays, I get to do a show with three people that we rarely technically agree on anything. But we can have a conversation at the end, making it sound like we agree on everything. But I will tell you, when we get in the green room afterwards, we have all our notes and we just go at it, right? And I think that's important. So I think that was one of the biggest things I really wanted to recap on. But I will tell you, you got to keep in mind, in the 70s and the 80s and actually the early 90s, before Liefeld got in the game and started taking pictures, it wasn't something that you did. You did not walk up to people and get pictures with people. That was a no-go. I just happened to be with someone who knew that was going to be very important in my culture and my history. I don't know how I convinced them at 12 years old I would accomplish everything I said as a 12-year-old, because I did end up getting a Vampirella and a Red Sonja exclusive, right? But I think I've always been happy about this business. Have I had bad days? Absolutely. I have had horrible days. But the second I open up that door, that's immaterial. My job is to, again, I know I said this a couple of times, my job is to create the greatest comic book therapy on earth. And I'm going to do that every single time, whether it's in person or on social networking or e-commerce.
I wish there were more people like you in this industry and in general. If you'd like to become a sponsor here on the Mighty Rewind podcast, make sure you reach out at the Mighty Rewind podcast at gmail.com.